Yeah, I'm looking for guests to come up here because I know that standardly the way that you run your lives is that you're typically on offense and nobody really gives you pushback. So what we're going to do on this live is we're going to test how well you can actually defend your position. So do you have a justification for abortion, Parker?
Yeah, I think that abortion is completely fine when the fetus is not sentient or the embryo is non-sentient.
Okay, and what is meant by sentience here?
First person subjective experience.
Okay, so do you take it that sentience is a necessary condition for moral status?
Yeah, so I think that they have to have past or present and future subjective experience to be granted value under my view.
I wasn't asking if you took like conjunctive qualifiers.
Have means necessary.
Okay, so you do take it that, this sort of past.
Yeah, it's necessary to have past or present and future subjective experience.
Asking the questions before you answer them?
I was answering the question you already said.
In the middle of me asking you?
Well, I was just clarifying. Are you a little kid?
I mean, you can clarify when I'm done asking you, right? But
wow, you're a little child.
Is the argument that it is necessary for moral consideration to be sentient and have to satisfy these past, present, and future conditions?
Yeah, when I say like they have to have this condition, that means it's necessary.
Okay, so what's the argument that the past, present, and future conjunctive qualifiers are necessary for moral consideration?
Well, when you say necessary for moral consideration, that just means under my intuitive view. So all we're going to do is we're going to compare the different intuitive views that exist, right? Someone will have a particular standard where they probably say life and future sentience. Another person might say they just have like life, cellular life. Another person will say past or present and future subjective experience. We're all just going to have qualifiers and it's based upon our intuition. So we'll just compare the different intuitions that people have.
Okay, so do you understand the question that I asked you?
Yeah, dude, I did.
Okay,
it's like asking the question. Why do you?
Hold on, buddy, calm down. When I ask
calm down, I was answering the question, but go for it.
Yeah. Well, I was still talking, right? When I ask you for
in the middle of me speaking,
when I ask you for an argument that establishes the conclusion that these past, present, and future conditions are necessary for moral status, you just responding back and telling
any of these positions are intuitive positions.
Interrupting, Parker. Don't do that. You're not.
I don't care.
Live, right? Now, when I ask you to establish a conclusion that these past, present, and future conditions have to be satisfied such that something is worthy of moral consideration, I'm looking for an argument that properly favors the conclusion that sentience is a necessary condition for moral status. So if you just give me a response back and say, look, people have all different types of intuitions that lead to the conclusion that past, present, or future, past and future are necessary, that doesn't actually establish an argument for the fact that being sentient is necessary for moral consideration. So again, when I ask you for an argument, I'm looking for a set of premises that favor the conclusion that sentience is a necessary condition for moral status.
Yeah, in the sort of way you're looking for it, there isn't an argument for either a pro-life or a pro-choice view. Right, under your perspective, your view wouldn't have an argument within that respect. We're going to compare these positions intuitively speaking. You don't know how the abortion conversation works, it seems.
First of all, do you know what an intuition is?
Yeah, so that's a completely irrelevant question, though.
Well, it is.
I mean, I can answer the question, but do you want to give me an argument? Wait, hold up. I just want to ask a question. Can you give me an argument?
Why is he running from the question? What is an intuition?
Okay, I'll answer the question. An intuition is going to be a particular desire, right, or a precondition that I'm going to have, right, conception I'm going to have of whether or not something is right or wrong in a particular scenario.
Sorry, intuitions are desires? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, so you take a desire satisfaction theory of harm.
So when I have a desire, right, let's say I value past or present and future subjective experience, it's going to be what I'm saying is my intuition in that context. So just to clarify, can I ask you a question?
Okay, so hold on, I don't know why.
Can I ask a question or no?
I'm still investigating your view, right? So
well, if I'm not able to ask questions, then I'm not going to engage in a conversation with you.
You can ask me questions, but we're still investigating your view.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Why are you running away from me investigating your view?
I'm not. I'm just asking a question.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep asking you questions about your view.
Either I'm gonna ask a question or I'm just gonna leave because I don't have time for this.
You can decide to run away if you want, but you're already.
It's not running away if you're not gonna let me engage in a conversation.
How am I not letting you? I'm literally asking you questions about your view. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yeah, you can ask me questions after I'm done asking you questions about your view. Do you understand that?
No. So I'm going to ask a question. If you don't answer the question, right, I'm going to take it as if you're not willing to engage in a...
Be quiet.
I'll mute myself. I know how the lives work.
Stop talking over me. You said that intuition.
Bro, I'm going to engage in a conversation with you. This is an interrogation.
You said that intuition.
I can unmute whenever I want. You know, it's
I have to mute you now because
you're not going to kick me off the...
Okay. Now,
I'm not gonna.
you said that intuitions are
Hello.
understood in terms of desires.
Hello.
Is that what you said. Now, if we
Keep muting
take
me, I'll kick.
intuition, why does he keep interrupting?
If you keep muting me,
self control.
I'll literally leave.
This is like really embarrassing.
I'll
You need to
literally
have
leave.
self-control, okay. So, anyways, if
Do you want me to leave?
intuitions, I don't care if you leave.
Do you want me to leave?
Do that if you want. I really don't care. But
Okay, you have two more.
investigating your claims. Stop.
Keep muting me, I'll leave.
Is that good? Stop talking.
Yeah, no, if you keep muting me, I'll leave.
Yeah, then stop talking and you won't get muted.
Well, if you let me engage in a conversation with you, then I won't do this.
Do you
You're not letting me engage in a
do you
conversation.
understand how to have a conversation? Like, if you're having conversations about your view and you present a view, somebody has to ask you questions about that view.
Yeah, I understand, and I let you ask questions. Now, can I ask a question, or is this not a conversation?
No, I asked you 2 questions and you're already desperate to pivot away because you don't like being interrogated.
Okay, keep asking questions, right? Can I ask, after you ask 2 more questions, can I ask a question?
Investigating your view because this is what you like to do.
Can I ask a question after you let me ask 2 questions?
Sorry. You like to play the offense. You don't like to play the defense, right? So we're going to keep investigating the claims.
If you ask me 2 more questions, can I ask 1?
Intuitions. Yeah, look, stop interrupting, okay? You defined intuitions in terms of desires, which, by the way, is very idiosyncratic. I don't think any philosopher actually defines intuitions that way, but let's just grant you that definition for intuitions, right? So you just mean that intuitions are identical to desires. So when you say some action is right or wrong, you just mean it's good or bad to the extent that it fully satisfies your desires or it significantly frustrates your desires, correct?
Yeah, like when I'm saying I have an intuition, right? Like I'm saying, like, for example, I think that someone should do the right thing, right? It's just a prescription that I think that this is the case. So I will have an intuition, right, that someone should engage in a particular behavior. Intuition just meaning I have a desire that they engage in this behavior. Is that
okay? That didn't answer the question that I asked you. So I'll ask you the question again, okay?
Okay.
You say something is good if you're defining intuitions in terms of desires. Are you saying that something is good to the extent to which it either fully satisfies your desires or significantly frustrates your desires? Is that the sort of view that you're taking?
So it depends on what you mean by frustrated or satisfied.
I'm right, using it standardly in the way that they use it in desire satisfaction theory.
No, I'm not using any particular type of reference here. When I say intuition, right, again, what I'm just using in typical colloquial conversations is I'm just saying, right, again, I desire, right, this particular action or this particular set of qualities. That's all that's relevant to this abortion conversation.
Okay, so when
we don't need to have any broader conversation.
Abortion is morally permissible. You're just saying that you have a desire that women should be able to get abortions.
Yeah. So I have the desire that women should be able to get abortions prior to conception, or not prior to conception, prior to sentience, right? Because I think that they don't meet my qualifiers for value.
Oh, well, I mean, that's just trivial, right? Nothing about that actually presents motivating reasons for people to accept your view. If all you mean to say is that I have a desire, hold on. If all you mean to say is that I have a desire that women should be able to get abortions, nothing about that tells us anything about the abortion or the pro-choice position actually being morally justifiable, nor does it actually tell us anything about, why we should accept your view. So in order for you to present a convincing argument for your view, you have to actually demonstrate through some kind of reasoning why we should accept the fact that a fetus isn't morally valuable prior to being sentient.
Can you give me an example of what that reasoning would be?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, right? If you take, say, like a counterfactual deprivationist theory of harm, for example, you might say that something is harmful to the extent to which in the next nearest possible world, they would have had X, if not Y have occurred, right? And you might present cases to appeal to people's intuitions that, might align with their intuition and say, look, well, this is what I mean by harm. And you can present like sort of case examples and see if they agree or disagree with that. And
can I respond to that?
They might be convinced based on the examples that you give on that counterfactual analysis of harm.
So that's exactly like what I brought up earlier, but like you for some reason said that wasn't reasoning because I gave like the example specifically. We're just going to give different types of intuitions that we're going to have, right? We're going to compare the different types of intuitions to see what we see to be more intuitive. Right. So like, for example, right, if I say past or present and future subjective experience, right, it's going to meet with my particular intuitions that I think people should be able to get access to abortion prior to sentience. And it's also going to meet like in terms of this particular scenario, because if someone were to give up, say, for example, like life and future sentience, right, that's going to go against our intuitions because it's going to indicate that things like sperm could possibly have value prior to conception because the sperm that created you had potential to be you in the future, potential to be sentient, and it was living, right? So you're going to meet that particular qualifier, or like the situation with IUDs, right? Women who have IUDs, right, that prevent implantation, that prevents a zygote from implanting into the uterine wall, therefore would be murder, under their particular view. So we're just going to compare different types of worldviews and intuitions that are, or say, oh, which one is more intuitive for us? That's essentially what these conversations
so
like boil down to.
a lot of these like contraception reductios are actually not really taken serious. Thank you for whoever sent that, by the way. That's crazy. But a lot of these contraception reductios aren't actually really taken seriously anymore. Like there's been a lot of responses to that. The first obvious response is that the sort of potential that you're talking about in the case of the sperm and egg is not an active type of potential, right? That's only a passive type potential. And, you know, if you understand the distinction between active and passive potential.
Wrong. I addressed that specifically.
Sorry, don't interrupt, right?
Well, you were wrong.
That's the first obvious distinction there. The second obvious distinction is that when people talk about potentiality, maybe you might be, well, first of all, what do you think potential means? Just very quick before I continue with my point.
Can I address the point you said active potential? So in terms of active potential, I will address that, but I just want to be able to address that.
I wasn't done with my point. I was just asking.
Yeah. If you're not going to let me respond, I'm just going to leave. Okay, so let me respond to the point.
Like 3 times now.
Let me respond to the point. Let me respond to the point.
You take.
Can I respond to the point, please?
What do you take potential to be? Just very.
Yeah, I will explain what potential is if you let me explain my position. Okay. So again, as it relates, can I please explain the position in terms of active versus passive potential that would be relevant to what you just said before you just move on to the next point, so you don't have to address that?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So the reason why this is active potential is because it is the case that there is your sperm, right, is en route specifically, or not your sperm, your parent's sperm is en route specifically to produce you. Because I said the sperm that created you. So when they were engaging the action, the sperm is already left. It's already en route to specifically cause conception because it's going to cause you. So we know that the sperm prior to conception, at least at, let's say maybe a second prior to conception, right, there was active potential for it to be sentient in the future because it is the case that it was on track to conception.
What do you think? So Parker, you're just confused on what active and passive potential mean. What do you think the distinction between those two things are?
Yeah, so when I'm talking about passive potential, you're saying this could possibly be the case if it met other conditions that it wasn't already en route to sort of like achieving, whereas active potential would be the case that it's en route to actively achieving this, right? So it is going to be considered active potential because it's en route to actually achieving this particular condition.
Okay, that's not even close. Okay, so this is why I asked you.
What do you mean it's not close? Definitions are subjective.
I'm about to explain why. So you got your chance to speak. Now I'm going to explain to you why you were wrong. Okay, this is why I asked you previously what you took potential to mean, which you didn't answer in the first place. So I'm going to ask you this clarifying question before I educate you. What is the definition of potential in your view?
Yeah, so potential is just specifically saying that there's a possible scenario in the future in which these particular conditions can be met.
Okay, I got it. That's where you're already wrong. Okay, so
wrong in a definition. That's a dumbass point.
Sorry, you got your chance to speak.
How can I be wrong in a definition?
Why is he? You got your chance to speak.
Our definition subjective.
Stop interrupting.
Our definition subjective.
You got your chance to speak. So
our definition subjective. Yes or no?
You got your chance to speak, so now I'm going to respond. Okay.
Our definition subjective.
You're wrong because typically when people, the sort of semantics that people use in abortion literature, whenever they're talking about potential, they're not talking about potential with respect to modal categories like possibilities, contingencies, stuff like that. That's not the sense in which.
Well, you're just telling me how other people are using the term, not how I am.
Holy shit! Stop talking.
No, you're just telling me how other people are
using. Like holy fuck! Stop interrupting. If
you're just telling me how other people are using the term, not me.
Let's keep muting him if he keeps interrupting. Okay.
Yeah. So I just want you to address that. If you're talking about other people's definitions, not mine.
Mute him because he consistently.
I can just keep unmuting myself, and they have a delay.
So, anyways. The point is that that's not how people talk about potential whenever they're talking about abortion literature, right? When they talk about potential, they're not talking about
other people's definitions. Thank you.
Shut the bro. Holy shit.
Wait, how am I wrong with my definition? Our definition subjective.
When people talk about possibility, people talk about potential. Definitions. They're not talking about potential with respect to modal categories, but rather they're talking about potential with respect to probability inferences.
I'm gonna keep asking.
So when they say something has a potential for X, what they mean to say there is that there's on a probabilistic inference that this will most likely be the case rather than not. That's what most people mean when they're talking about potential. Secondly, the distinction that you drew between active and passive potency was patently false. Typically, when people talk about an active kind of potency, the sort of potency or potential that they're talking about there is with respect to its personal identity, its composition, it's stuff like that. So there's an obvious distinction. There's two kinds of distinctions that you can draw between the sperm and egg and a fertilized egg, or sperm and egg separately and a fertilized egg. One, you can draw an ontological distinction there, which is pretty obvious. There's a clear, substantial change that occurs at the point of conception. The second sort of change that you can draw there is one of personal identity, right? So if you're making the claim that, the sperm is what is responsible for you, what you're implicitly accepting there is that you have some personal identity relation to sperm, that you're identical to sperm in some regard, whether you're identical in some numerical sense, whether you're identical in some formal identity sense, you're implicitly accepting some kind of identity theory there when you say the phrase, you were once a sperm. But obviously that's false. When people talk about abortion, they're not saying that you were identical to a sperm. A sperm in its fullest capacity will never develop to become a sentient being, right? But a fertilized egg would, because it's the type of thing that has that potency, whereas a sperm doesn't. So that's why those arguments fail. But regardless.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead and respond.
Yeah, so identical twins that have the exact same DNA, in some scenarios they have the exact same DNA. Are they the same person?
No, so that depends on your theory of personhood. So if, like
And also, can you tell me if definitions are subjective?
Sorry?
Are definitions subjective?
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Okay, so by the way, you can't tell me I'm wrong with a definition if I'm using a definition based upon the way that I'm using the term. If you think definitions are subjective, you're just saying you define it differently than the way that I do. And then secondly, if you're using that specific personal theory of identity in terms of saying specifically the only reason why it doesn't meet the criteria is because of the particular set of DNA or that would exist for that entity, well, then you can't make a distinction between identical twins.
Wait, that's not what I said, first of all. Secondly, I'll respond to the claim that you made, okay? So first of all, nobody said anything about DNA. I don't know where the fuck you got that from. I was talking about theories of personal identity and ontological distinctions there, so I don't know if you actually tried the conversation.
No, at conception, what happens that identifies that it's a different entity?
Sorry, don't interrupt.
At conception, what identifies?
Go back to the muting game because you can't let people actually get back, and respond to his points, right? So now we're going to
mute me.
The muting game. We're going to treat you like a child, and you're going to like a child because you can't actually let people respond.
No, you're.
So now, the point was specifically about personal identity claims, the obvious distinction between the personal identity of, say, a zygote or something like that versus the identity of, say, a sperm. That was the distinction that I was making there. So I don't know where you got this DNA idea from. Secondly,
how do you distinct the difference?
Secondly, the claim.
Oh my God, bro.
Okay, yeah, stop interrupting. Now, secondly.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you one more time.
There's an obvious distinction, or there's two things that you can draw between like a zygote and a fertilized egg. So like a zygote in its fullest capacity does not and will never have the potency to grow up to have sentient experiences, goals, dreams, values, and stuff like this. Whereas a fertilized egg does. And then also to respond to your claim that you made about definitions being subjective, which you tried to get a gotcha moment there. That was like really embarrassing. Not only are definitions subjective, but definitions also are, they have like utility. So we don't just use definitions and create terms and meanings just because we want to, because we feel that way. We use things that have the most utility, right? So it doesn't promote utility to talk about possibility in terms of modal categories when it comes to the abortion conversation. In fact, that's not how most people use the term when they're talking about abortion literature, right? Whenever people are talking about potential, they're talking about it with respect to a probabilistic inference. Now you're going to respond. Do you know what a probabilistic inference is, Parker?
Am I able to respond to the things that you prior said before I get asked four things? So I want to address this. So in terms of you saying I brought up a gotcha in terms of the subjective definitions. Well, that's just how we use it. You're saying we utilize it based on utility. Well, that's your own subjective inference that you specifically want to engage in it utilizing specifically utility, right? Again, when I'm explaining this, it's going to provide utility to me, right? Because I'm describing what I think when I'm relating to the abortion conversation. The same way that typically people within society, they might not define sentience in the same way that I define it, but it would be relevant towards my view to define it in the way that I see, right? Particularly subjective experience. You can say other people colloquially might use the term differently. That doesn't change whether or not I can or cannot use this term in this particular way. And then as it relates to the abortion conversation in terms of the personal identity, right? I understand there's a different personal identity that exists, but the way that you're going to distinct that is not predicated off of life. It's predicated off of, right, either the fact that you're referencing the difference between diploid and haploid, you're referencing DNA, right, or you're referencing some type of distinction that exists at conception, right, that would be able to identify that it's a distinct being, right, under your worldview, for your whether or not you grant it moral value.
Yeah, so I don't know if you're actually like tracking the conversation, but it was pretty obvious that the distinction that can be made there, like say from a sperm's potential versus like a fertilized potential, can either be addressed with reference to its personal identity, which by the way, there's different theories of personal identity. There's the sort of theories of personal identity that consist in the psychological profile of an entity. There's a certain type of theories of identity that consist
I'm
in
asking what yours
all
is,
right,
dude.
John,
Fuck.
now we're gonna have to go back on mute, right? We're gonna have to treat you like a child again, right? Now, there are certain theories
Literally
that
mute me
consist in the sort of
one more time. I'll
unity of the organism. Yeah, yeah, keep crying. I like that. Keep crying. Come back. Come off mute and cry again, right? Oh, he's gone. Bye. Now, there are certain theories of personal identity that consist in the functional unity of the organism, right? So obviously, like if somebody's taken like an animalist view of personal identity, that's going to consist in the functional unity of the organism, which the organismal life doesn't begin until conception. That's when the substantial change occurs, okay? So all of the Parker fanboys in the comments who are riding his meat like a bunch of brain dead idiots, any single one of you are welcome to come up here and actually defend Parker's position.